Well, greetings, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm awfully tired of not being able to see all of you, and I'm looking forward to the day when we can again. But rest assured, I am picturing each and every one of you in either a beautiful location or some productive office environment. Turning industry's words and ambitions into commercially viable paths to the moment clean future fuels exist is a challenge that's been taken up by the best and brightest in our global industry. Hardly a week goes by that another concept, test project, or regulatory stick doesn't push our small yet vital industry forward. Responsibility for great ideas falls often on the shoulders of those who master the details. The chairman of the session just ahead, Dr. Arlie Sterling, Marsoft's president, has been shining the bright light of knowledge on the dark corners where critical details often hide throughout his career. And at almost no time in the 30 years it has been my privilege to work with Dr. Sterling and the Marsoft team have I seen such accumulated brain power turn toward a single ambition like it has to the challenge of the decarbonization of our industry. I've had a front row seat to the collaborative, data-driven, disciplined effort between MIT labs, a talented array of PhDs and naval engineers, as the team developed a computer-driven engineering commercial product designed to reduce our industry's carbon footprint. Today, Dr. Sterling and his team will lay out Marsoft's here and now solution to a big challenge we face as an industry reducing CO2 emissions and making money in the process. And we can all learn from Marsoft's model of collaboration with global best-in-class experts to deliver powerful, innovative, and practical solutions. The silo-busting approach Marsoft has pioneered is critical when we are confronted with the immense challenge of redefining shipping for a carbon-free world. So joining Dr. Sterling today is Dr. Hauke Kite-Powell, CTO, Marsoft Managing Decarbonization Program, Belinda, Adye, one of Arlie's partners and director of Marsoft's London office, and a special guest, Thomas Harris, General Manager for CTEC, Projects New Build Division, who is leading their retrofits program. CTEC, as many of you will know, is a member of the regroup. Thomas, thank you very much for joining us today. Now, before I turn it over to Dr. Sterling, I'd like to remind our audience that they can submit questions throughout the presentation by going to the chat icon in the upper right dialog box of your GoToWebinar screen. If we do not get to all of the questions during the Q&A session, Dr. Sterling and his team have promised to respond personally. Dr. Sterling, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Jim, thank you so much for that generous introduction and all the support you've given us over the years here. We're excited to be talking about how that progress has culminated now into delivering the services to the industry. And thanks to the participants. I know we've all got a busy day and appreciate you taking 45 minutes with us today to go through the Marsoft Green Screen program. I think as background, we all know what's going on in the industry today. We all know that what we are going to be doing as an industry is significantly reducing our carbon footprint, reducing our carbon emissions. We know we can do that. We know we can do that because we did it last year for sulfur. What we're going to talk about today is the advantage, oddly enough, that CO2 has over sulfur. The advantage is we get paid when we reduce our emissions of CO2. That didn't happen for sulfur. That means the success we had in 2020 for reducing emissions 7-fold and saving countless lives as a result of the sulfur emissions reductions is something that we can look to proceed perhaps even more quickly in many ways with CO2 reduction. So in the course of this presentation, we're going to tell you how we can help make that happen. There are two things we know about the transition to the decarbonized future of shipping. One, it's going to cost money. Two, it's going to be a little uncertain, a little risky path that we're going to follow. The green screen approach that we are taking, it's going to bring some money to the table to make that easier to walk down that path and take away the risk, give you a clearer map to where we're going to go and take the risk out of stumbling along the way. With that, Hauke, let's turn to the first slide. So what we're going to describe today is the green screen program that delivers carbon credits in return for the reduction in emissions that you provide when you retrofit your ships. The approach that we've taken is proven. It builds on past practice. We know it can work. It's very practical. We've demonstrated that in exercise after exercise here. And it generates money for you. And we're going to show each of those points as we go forward here. I think probably it's a little bit of a surprise to the audience that shipping can actually use carbon credits as a way to generate revenue. So let me talk a little bit about that program and what has already been done in the past. Next, please. So the way I think of it, Marsoft didn't invent carbon credits, nor did we invent retrofits, or the process, the gold standard process by which carbon credits are verified and issued. That process was taken 10 years ago by the industry. AkzoNobel took a pioneering step with the gold standard rating agency and actually used that process to issue, verify, and sell carbon credits. So why haven't we heard about it since that time? The answer is that the technology that was available 10 years ago was just not up to the task. It was too demanding in terms of data, too costly and time consuming in terms of how to gather the information and process it. So what we saw is an opportunity out of that challenge. We saw the opportunity is really to go back to school for many of us, go back to MIT and say, hey, look, here's the problem. How can we bring some more horsepower to shipping to be able to reduce the cost and take the risk and uncertainty out of the process of using carbon credits for shipping? Next slide, please. So we're going to go through several slides here. We're going to talk about the business case for the program. We're going to talk about the cash that we think is available for representative cases and why we think that. We're going to describe how the program works in some detail, what we have drawn upon to be able to de-risk and de-cost the process. And we're going to give you a simple step-by-step guide for getting going here. But I think I'd like to make sure that at the end of this, you remember these critical elements of the business case. First, the green screen program gives you control over the revenue generating power of your emissions reduction that you're going to be delivering to the shipping industry. It's a low cost ticket to a market that everyone we talk to thinks is going to be rising. The price of carbon is going to be going up under any scenario that we've looked at. We know that OECD is targeted $150. I think Trafigura says $300. Maersk, I think, is also at 150. There's a remarkable consensus. It's always a little bit dangerous when there's a consensus. But the fact is, everything we see going on in the industry says carbon prices are going up. And the ticket that green screen is giving you is the way to play that game. It's the ticket to the game of rising carbon prices. There's just one more thing I want to make sure you remember. Buy that ticket now. The game is going to be exciting, but you need to get started right now to make sure that you're in at the outset. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I'm going to very quickly go through the financial story here. And you're going to see this story repeated because I think some of the numbers are going to be a bit of a surprise, and the messages here are, I think, complex. So let me just start out by talking about how much it costs to begin the green screen program. And as I said at the outset, one of the challenges that we saw from the process 10 years ago was that it was just too expensive, too time consuming. So we've harnessed tools that allow us to take the time and take the cost out. And in fact, when you go to our website and see the application, you'll see that you can take one unique ship through the program for $24,000. Sister ships only cost $4,000 incrementally. So, and we can deliver the green screen results in a matter of a day, as long as you tell us when the retrofit program is going to start and what you're going to be doing in that retrofit. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. Now that one-time investment supports up to 10 years of verification and issuance of carbon credit revenue. Spend it once in 10 years, spend it once at the beginning, 10 years of opportunity to earn carbon credit revenue. Next slide, please. All right, let's take a simple example. You save 9 tons per day with your retrofit program. That's probably what a Cape or a Suezmax or a Kamsarmax could generate. So it's for a larger ship in this exercise. We can do the same exercise for an MR or a Handy, and the numbers turn out to be very same. The message is the same. Next slide, please. All right, so what cash do you as a ship owner get when you reduce your carbon emissions by 9 tons a day of CO2 without green screen? You get nothing. You're not paid for it. You don't have the carbon credits. You can't sell them in the market. What can you get with green screen and with the process that we described with gold standard? Well, at $50 a ton, which, by the way, is just 1/3 of what the OECD says is necessary, what Maersk and others say is necessary, you get $72,000 a year after accounting for the sales costs associated with that. So what is green screen to you? Green screen's found money. Do you want to go the path of spending all the money on the retrofits and not getting any credit? Or do you want to spend the money on getting the credit and earn the $72,000 every year potentially for 10 years at a one-time cost of $24,000? That option to go to green screen, we think of that as a very straightforward decision. You got to go for the $72,000. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the only reason you might not want to go that route is you think it's risky, you don't know how it's going to work. And what we're going to describe down the path here is that the gold standard certification process takes the risk out of the process of knowing you'll be able to verify and issue the carbon credits. Hauke is going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. Next slide, please. One of the things we've come to appreciate about the industry is the ingenuity of the technical managers who are driving the retrofit programs. I've seen more retrofit combinations than I dreamt were available as we have talked with the many ship owners as describing this program. And we might hear a little bit more from Thomas about some of the things that are going on in the retrofit market. So we set ourselves a challenge. We want to be able to cover every single one of those retrofit options, make sure when an engineer has proposed a program for a ship or for a fleet of ships, we're able to capture that on a ship-specific basis and help verify that it delivers the benefits that the engineering team has described. And if we miss something, the great thing about the model that we've developed is that we can add it to it very quickly and at low cost. And that for those of you who are considering wind assist, I think that's going to be a very valuable capability. Next slide, please. Now, one of the things that I think is going to be a surprise to people is how well positioned shipping is to earn carbon credits. There isn't an owner who hasn't shared with me their bitter complaint about how much time and effort that they have had to go through to satisfy the IMO, to satisfy the banks, and now to satisfy the charters who are asking for even more information. And all that information has to be audited. Thank heavens we've got companies like PwC who do such a good job in that audited process. But what that means for us as an industry is that we can draw upon not only the scientific rigor that the MIT model brings, but the wealth of quality control data that the industry is already providing and has already gone through an audit process in order to realize the credits. And that's why carbon credits are such a good tool for shipping. We have the information available, we have more detail and more ability to process that information than almost any other industry I know. Next slide, please. All right. I'm going to talk about 3 very good reasons why you should start now. If it's not obvious by now, let me just go through them. And let's get the next 2 bullets up on this one. First of all, got to do your job. The stakeholders driving your company, public or private, demand a carbon emissions footprint be reduced. Shareholders and owners demand that they be fully compensated for the cash that they are investing in those retrofits. Carbon credits are a source of cash, low cost, low risk. Why wouldn't you take advantage of it? By the way, I want to give credit to Bill Belichick, the coach of the New England Patriots. Do your job. That's the phrase he always brings to the job, and that's been an extraordinary, successful winning season, the series of winning seasons that he's brought to the New England Patriots. So on that note, let's go to the next slide, and let's pick up the next two bullets while we're at it. So, doing your job, I know we all do that. Being a hero, that's pretty cool. So let me give you two different circumstances. One, you're an engineer, you're bringing your retrofit program up to the board, and you're saying, well, I want to spend $5–10 million on my fleet in order to meet EEXI, CII, and ETS, emerging ETS standards. The only thing you know at that point is that you've lost the board. Who knows what EEXI, CII, and ETS even means when you're at that level? And you're asking for money. Now consider the alternative. You want to go to the board, you say, I'm going to reduce the carbon footprint of my fleet, and I can tell you exactly how much my investment is going to return in terms of reduced carbon footprint, and I'm going to bring revenue to the table at the same time. Well, that's a way to make friends. That's going to be a much more successful program when you go to the proposal, when you take it to the board. Finally, next slide, please. And one more. What did we learn just last year, a year and a half ago? I think Thomas can tell us. We learned from the scrubber experience, delay does not pay. These are complicated things that are ship specific, and there's a bunch of competition for the specialized resources that are required to deliver this retrofit program. Think ahead, plan ahead, start now. Next slide, please. So the great news, we've made it really easy to get started. The first step, go to the green screen agreement. Next slide, please. And tell us which ships, unique ships, you want to enroll. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hopefully you've got a lot of sister ships as part of that. But in the agreement, just name the ships, put down the IMO number so we can get started. Next slide. Then we're going to ask you to go to your files, the same files that you've put into place for your EEXI program. We're going to ask you to pull out numbers that you've already got there and the sea trial reports that you already have to have in place. And if you don't have that information, we can tell you how we can fill in the blanks. Now, so these are the two steps. What's the last thing and the thing that you want to do immediately following this presentation? Go to www.marsoft.com/marsoft-greenscreen and get started. Thanks very much. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Hauke to tell you how this actually works. Hauke, to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlie. Next slide, please. So the key to generating carbon credit revenue is to have an accurate accounting of the fuel consumption and emission savings that are generated by the retrofits that you install in your ships. Next, please. What that means in practice is that you have to be able to accurately characterize how the speed consumption curves for your ship have shifted as a result of the retrofit investment. And then you can accurately estimate the fuel consumption change under the post-retrofit operations of the ship. Next, please. The traditional approach to this, as Arlie has mentioned, is to rely on consumption data from Noon reports. And that is notoriously noisy. It involves a lot of data manipulation to get meaningful information from it. And even then, it's not highly reliable. So when we approached this problem, we started to work with the gold standard organization. Next, please, thank you. The Gold Standard organization is a pioneer in carbon credit work, particularly with shipping. They started almost 10 years ago to develop a methodology together with AkzoNobel to apply this carbon credit issuance to high-tech coatings for ships. They found that the Noon report-based process was ultimately unworkable. And so we worked with them and with MIT to develop an alternative approach. Next slide, please. That alternative approach uses a model-based FOC calculation instead of relying on Noon reports. We worked with colleagues at the MIT Sea Grant Design Lab to build this model over the course of the last 2 years. And we've come up with a solution that's workable and streamlined and very accurate. Next, please. The way the model works is to generate, using hydrodynamic principles, information about the specific ship, as Arlie outlined, the engine and the propeller, to generate fuel consumption curves as a function of speed and as a function of loading for the ship. And it does this both for the baseline or pre-retrofit condition and for the ship with the retrofits applied. Those two curves are shown in the example on the right here. We then verify those curves against data from the ship's sea trial and speed trial reports to ensure that we have the performance of the ship characterized accurately. Generally, we find that we're within 3% or so. So the model is able to capture very accurately the performance of a wide range of ships. And then all you have to do is tell us how much time that ship spent post retrofit, at what speed, under what loading condition, and we can accurately calculate the delta in fuel consumption and emissions. Next, please. And the good news is that the gold standard process will take that information as an accurate representation of the emissions saved and as the basis for issuing carbon credits to you for the retrofit investment. Next, please. So that combination of the Marsoft green screen model and the gold standard verification methodology gives you this streamlined access to carbon credit revenue instead of the traditional Noon report approach, which really is unworkable. It's a simple two-step process of first benchmarking and verifying that we have correctly captured the performance of the ship pre and post retrofit, and then monitoring and auditing the actual operations of the ship and the associated emissions and carbon credits. The process makes your retrofit investments more profitable and predictable. And that's the good news. The challenge is that there is a limited time window to take advantage of this. Once a particular kind of retrofit becomes a widely adopted industry standard practice, it's no longer eligible for carbon credits under the gold standard methodology. And there are other reasons to ensure that you have the correct technical guidance, both on the carbon credit question and on the retrofit execution itself in place. And for more on that topic, let me turn it over to Thomas.
Thank you, Hauke. So at CTEC, we're working with a number of clients on understanding what these upcoming regulations mean for their vessels and in helping them implement retrofits to achieve that. And the first learning I want to highlight to everyone is that having done a lot of EEXI assessments, having looked at CII for a number of owners, these issues are a challenge for everyone across the entire industry. I think there are perhaps some misconceptions that this is a problem for certain vessel types, or that this is not a problem for me because I have a young modern fleet. A statistic that shocked me as we started digging into this is that for vessels 5 years and younger, we found that 60% of them will not comply with EEXI. And EEXI is really the easiest stage of what's coming next. So I think, you know, as an entire industry, we need to get together and reflect on exactly how big this issue is and how large the volumes of people going into the retrofitting side of work is going to be. Then the next thing I would point out is that owners are considering much more aggressive retrofits. The reason for that is very simple. It's because they have to. Anyone out there who's thinking that EPL will solve my problems, I urge you to go away and study the requirements of CII, because engine power limitation on its own will not make your ship more eco-friendly. It's a very powerful tool in combination with other types of retrofits, such as changing a propeller, but it's simply not enough on its own. It's a workaround for EEXI. When Maersk Line first started changing bulbous valves, they referred to it as a radical retrofit. Today, in 2021, if you go to a dry dock anywhere in the world, there's a good chance you'll see a new bulbous valve, a new propeller sitting there on the quayside. So these much larger, more ambitious retrofits are starting to become commonplace in order for the more proactive owners to comply with these requirements. Then on those technologies, I would draw your attention to the lead times for energy saving devices. So I think it's pretty obvious to all of us that as demand for these things goes up, so do the waiting lists. But the point I would really emphasize to owners, and that I find is often not understood by owners, is that energy saving devices are custom pieces of equipment. It's not an off-the-shelf piece of stock. It is designed specifically for your vessel. So you need to give the supplier time to identify the right design for you and design and make a custom piece of equipment. I had an owner who came to me a few weeks ago and said, I have my vessel dry docking next month and I want to put a duct on it. But the maker told me it's a 5-month wait time. Do you know anyone who has a spare one? I really can't emphasize enough that that's not how these types of technology work. If you put a duct design for another ship on your vessel, you're more likely to reduce your efficiency than increase it. So allow for that in your planning. Next one, Arlie. Yard capacity is being booked. The first point on there talks about ballast water treatment. There is still a lot of ballast water treatment to be installed in the world fleet, and that means that dry docks that might have spent 5 days on the blocks are spending 10. So already we're seeing a reduction in capacity to catch up with that. On top of that, we have owners coming in thinking that they're going to retrofit, and again, extending their average time on the blocks, which is reducing capacity. And the third item is that in a traditional market, usually as owners, we're looking at the back end of our docking window to get the vessels into dry dock, especially in moments like this when we have very good freight rates. That also, we're starting to see a shift, because once you commit to a retrofit and you have a business case and a payback time, the sooner you get that on your vessel, the sooner you complete that payback period and you start taking the benefit. So between those different items, what we're seeing is a perfect storm of yard space evaporating very quickly, demand for these types of technology quickly looking like it would exceed supply, and a general congestion in the industry. And Arlie mentioned previously the challenge with scrubbers, where we saw vessels arriving and spending 10 days at anchor before they could even get into the yard because of capacity restrictions. And we see that over the next 18 months to 2 years, a similar issue is going to happen for people looking to retrofit their vessels to make them compliant. So my advice to you is that coordinated execution is the key to your success. So plan your retrofits in advance. Don't pick them at random. Find the right retrofits for your vessels that give you the returns you expect, and make sure that you are compliant. And put together the right team, whether that's internally or you find an external partner. Don't put it on your superintendent to treat this like it's spare parts he can manage in the dry docking. This is highly complex stuff, and you need a team that understands what they're doing that can help drive you to success. I'll hand you back to you, Arlie.
Thomas, thank you so much. I think that the lesson that we should all have learned from scrubbers is that things are more complicated and perhaps more costly than we initially expected. But what I really learned from your slide, Thomas, was the scale of the retrofit program that's underway in parallel with ballast water treatment and what's going on in the cruise industry. So there are 30,000 ships that are candidates for this. And perhaps I should say, with Thomas's observation, there may be closer to 50,000 ships that are candidates for the retrofits, and we'll need to go through that process. This is an industry-wide problem that we have to be aware of, the possibility of congestions and bottlenecks going forward. So I talked earlier about your presentation, your discussion with the board about your retrofit program. I'd like to go through that one more time, just to give you an example of some of the most powerful messages that you can take forward when you propose your retrofit program. First of all, just a quick quote from one of our clients' ESG statements, committed to reduce the carbon footprint of the existing fleet. That's, of course, critical, because if you don't reduce the carbon footprint, that fleet is going to have a short life and is going to lose value and lose competitiveness. Next slide, please. So let's just take a case of 18 ships, 3 unique and 15 sisters, and go through the numbers. If you hit the next 2 bullets, please. So these are the same ships we talked about earlier. Retrofitting reduces emissions by 9 tons per day of CO2 per ship. Assume that they're trading for 200 days per year. Well, you go through those calculations one more time. We looked at a single ship before. Now let's take a look at the fleet. You're going to generate about $260,000 worth of carbon credit revenue at current carbon prices that are between $5 and $10 a ton. Excuse me. And remember, you're going through that low-cost green screen process. You're going to spend about $130,000 to get there. So that's found money. So let's start with the fact that this isn't really an investment decision. You're finding money where it was not before. But let's say you have to justify it in terms of an investment. That's a 6-month payback for 10 years worth of positive cash flow. Pretty compelling story. Next slide, please. But the key thing is that current prices are not where we should be planning around. We've seen the numbers from numerous analysts talking about more than 100, more than 150. Let's talk about the slide you sent to your board and a more realistic view of carbon prices over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with $50 a ton. And remember, Maersk has told us they need 150, Trafigura says 300, OECD says 150. So we're being pretty conservative along the lines here. And we've recognizing that there are multiple markets for carbon. So we can't yet say there's a single price of carbon in this industry. And we'll take it at a bunker price of $450 a ton. Next slide, please. So the chart on the right shows what your retrofit program does with and without green screen. On the left, the value of the fuel savings per year. Now, we all know that owners don't get the full value of the fuel savings. There's always a sharing of that with the charter. And so we're recognizing that there's some sharing going on to the tune of about 50%. I think most people would regard that as a little bit optimistic unless you're always trading in the spot market. On the right, look what the benefits are to you of the green screen program. That's that green bar at the top. That increases your revenues by about 50%. And as Hauke says, that makes that retrofit program a lot more attractive financially. And in the process, you're probably going to expand your retrofitting. You're going to do more in that regard. And that's an important aspect of the program. Next slide, please. Oh, questions and answers. So we've been talking so long here. Belinda, now we're turning it over to you. And you tell us what the audience has been asking us.
Thank you very much, Arlie. And hello, everybody. It's very, very nice that you've joined us, so many of you today. We really appreciate that. And I can see that there are some really good questions coming in. So I'm sorry I won't be able to pick them all up because, as Arlie said, there's been a lot of talking already, and we've taken up a lot of your time. But let me start with a few that I feel pick up some of the themes that are coming in. So I want to start with this one. It's a little bit more. My fleet's performance is already being measured using AER, EEXI, and EEOI. How can green screen tell me anything more? Hauke, perhaps that's something you could comment on?
Yes, the green screen process gives you the information you need to access carbon credits. That is the key distinction. The other measures are important. You need them for compliance. but none of those measures give you the verification that you need to generate carbon credit revenue. So that is the main distinction. It may also, in the process, give you information that's relevant to fine-tuning your retrofit program. The green screen model can give you detailed information about the effect of alternative retrofit combinations. But the real key is the carbon credit access.
Okay, thank you. Let's try this one. How is the Marsoft green screen different from services from class societies or others? What is different about the Marsoft approach? Arlie, perhaps you're best placed to give us a comment on that.
The good news, Belinda, is that Hauke already answered the question. We're focused on getting carbon credit revenues. Class societies and others are focused on giving technical advice, making sure that as the many technical challenges that Tom has highlighted are addressed carefully. We're bringing in the revenue. That's what makes us different.
There's a couple of questions on carbon credits particularly. This is one perhaps coming back to you, Arlie. So the credit is issued on the basis of the model prediction rather than the actual operation, or perhaps that's better for you, Hauke.
It is both. So we need to know what the actual operations of the ship were post retrofit in terms of its speed of operation, the loading conditions. But those are data that you routinely collect already and reliably. The model then calculates the fuel consumption delta based on those operating parameters. And under the gold standard process, that result is accepted as the basis for emissions reduction calculation and carbon credits.
Thank you. Okay. Another one which is a little bit more focused on the practicalities. Our dry docks are scheduled for 2022. Why should I sign up for green screen now? Thomas, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I hope the takeaway from the slide I gave was that there's a lot of complexity to these kind of projects and you need to plan them out thoroughly. And also that the lead times for this are much longer than a lot of people anticipate. So I would encourage anyone to start looking into this now, even if you're talking about dry dock in 2023, because the worst case scenario is you take your ship into dock next year, and by the end of 2023, you're back in dock because you didn't get it right first time. Whether you didn't find the right retrofit option, or whether by the time you found it, you couldn't get it on the ship in time. So absolutely, proactivity is the key to successful retrofitting.
People are often scared of being first movers, but you would say this is the opposite this time. We should rush ahead.
Well, I would say that the first movers in this area started 5 years ago. Maersk, CMA, it's actually a well-trodden path.
Okay, thank you. Let's come back to the carbon credits. Here's a quick question. How do we maximize the value of the credits? Am I supposed to do that on my own, or can Marsoft help with that? Arlie, do you want to talk about that?
Well, certainly Marsoft can help, but I think we just need to be very practical here. The carbon markets are rapidly developing. I mean, we've seen the UN report that describes the path of that market from $300 million last year to maybe $50 billion over the next 5 years, and a change in the regulatory and trading framework that is going to really make that market become a vital contributor to decarbonization. We need to see how that process evolves, and recognizing there are not going to be any carbon credits actually issued until 2022, probably late second half 2022 at the earliest. I think we just need to be patient and see what opportunities are going to emerge. I can tell you I'm seeing a lot of brokers out there standing ready to help sell credits. So I think there's going to be lots of good opportunities to commercialize the credits that are being issued by ship owners.
Okay, and related to that, why would the availability of credits diminish as more ships participate? Lee?
Sorry, was that?
Yeah, why would the availability of credits diminish as more ships participate?
Well, I don't think the availability of credits diminishes. Credits, as more ships participate, we're going to be issuing more credits. What we're going to be seeing as a result of the regulatory drive on the voluntary market is that low quality credits are going to be driven out. So we're probably going to see a reduction in low quality credits, an increase in the supply of high quality credits. The key is we're going to see a higher demand as companies and other organizations step forward to reduce their CO2 emissions, make aggressive commitments to doing so. And the only way they can meet those is by buying credits from an industry like shipping that can move fast at lower costs than they can.
Thank you. One final question, because I think we've got to get back and summarize and finish off quite soon. So very quick question. Can I go to MIT and get access to the model? Hauke, do you want to finish off that one?
Yeah, yes, you can, in fact. For those of you who are keen to look under the hood and at the technical details of how the green screen model works, the code for that model will be in the public domain. You can go to the GitHub at MIT and look at it there. Of course, the data that feeds the model and gives results for specific ships, those data are proprietary to the owners and are not shared in that way. But the model code itself is public domain.
Thank you very much. And I do apologize to everybody who sent in questions. There are some really good questions here, and I do promise that we will get back to you with proper answers very promptly. So thank you very much again for that. Okay, in the interest of time, I will hand back to you, Arlie, to summarize, and then we can draw to a close.
Belinda, thank you so much for going through that. I can only imagine the kind of questions that are coming in here. This is something new and exciting. So just a few key takeaway points for you out of this. One is what we've just described to you is a unique program for generating carbon credits to bring you cash from the emissions, CO2 emissions reduction that you are delivering. It's unique, it's powerful, adds a great deal of value. The investments that we've made over the past 4 years to put into place the models, the process with gold standard, and to test and test and test all of it with actual data to confirm that things are working as well or even better than we initially planned. We're taking the risk and the cost out of the process. In payback terms, you're getting your money back in less than 6 months. But again, you need to take a look at that for each of individual ships and the retrofit program that you have in place. This is, as Thomas emphasized, this is a detailed ship-specific calculation that you need to walk through very carefully and verify this. But the key is buy low and sell high. Right now, there's a cheap way to buy your carbon credits. Go through the green screen program. The only thing we know about over the next 5 years is those carbon prices are going to be going up. And you want a ticket to play that game. That's what we're offering now. Last slide, please. Jim, I know we're going to be running another webinar, yes, and what it means for shipping. Let me just say that all the calculations, all the arguments that we just went through for the green screen and the voluntary carbon credits market, they play with even more effect in the ETS market. Let me just ask you to think about your next board meeting. Your board, already confused by EEXI, EEOI, and CII, says, well, what is this retrofit program going to do for me in the ETS market? Am I going to be a buyer or a seller? How are you going to answer that question? Green screen can help, but I think that's going to be a topic for our next webinar. Jim, thank you so much for hosting the program.
Thank you, Arlie, very much. Belinda, Hauke, Thomas, absolutely fascinating material, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share it with everybody today. You know, and I think you all know I'm extremely proud of our industry's decarbonization initiatives. And now I love the fact that green screen can make my friends out there heroes. That's fantastic, because I think they already know that they are the best and the brightest, and because of that, I am even more convinced that our planet will be in safe hands, especially as they now all move rapidly to your website and move forward with retrofits and green screen. So listen, thank you all again very much for your time this morning. thank you all out there. I know, as Belinda said, they'll have answers for you to any of the questions that weren't responded to. And again, take advantage of Arlie's website, jump in there, and I look forward at Marine Money to doing anything and everything we can to help you in this amazing journey. Thank you all very much. See you soon.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all.
Bye.
Thank you.